I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm awesome. I am super excited to learn more from you about alligator snapping turtles tonight.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm happy to talk about those. I could talk about them all the time. So,
Awesome. So, what we're going to do is take a deep dive into the biology, ecology, and a little bit about the conservation of these massive turtles. Greg, why the alligator snapping turtle? How did you become interested in them?
I think just being a young kid, I was like really into reading books, and because I was really into turtles and reptiles. Because when I was a kid in Florida, the part of Florida I grew up in was still largely undeveloped. I was basically on the tail end of the good old days that people would talk about. So
Cool.
every day was indigo snakes, Florida box turtles, gopher tortoises. So I just quickly started just getting obsessed with turtles and reptiles. So every time my parents would take me to the mall, I would be like, "Take me to the Walden Books," and I would go look at field guides and stuff like that. And so all the really good books on turtles were not in like a kids section. So I just started reading like field guides and full blown, um, adult books, as a kid. And alligator snapping turtles were the one that just right off the bat, as soon as I saw a photo of one and I think an Audubon field guide or something, just jumped right off the page. They're kind of like the T-Rex of turtles. They're infamous. They're big. They're powerful. They're awe-inspiring. And just as a kid, I just would read every single thing that I could find out about them. And then I think for a birthday, I got like a couple hatchlings, and that just kind of started my obsession with wanting to learn about them.
Okay. Well, that's very cool. How did you transition to learning about them and finding them in the wild?
I mean that. Oh, it took like a long time to find them in the wild. So basically, I went from being a kid just reading about them and reading about the habitat, watching any special on TV about them, and living in South Florida, just wanting them to be there, but they weren't there. I would catch like common snappers or something. And then when I moved to Georgia, when I was like a early teen or something like that, I knew that they were in Georgia, so I would just go out and check every creek. Started to learn I was looking in like the wrong river drainages, and then one day a buddy of mine, he went on like this is fast forwarding a lot of years. So he went on like a date with a girl from a dating site, and he was like, "Oh, I met this girl. She's at this creek. You would love it. There's those little musk turtles all over the bottom." And I like dropped my phone and just like okay, I'll be there. And he sent me a pin, and I get there, and it was like this crystal clear flowing stream. There were just little musk turtles running all over the bottom, and it was amazing. And I was just doing videos and photos and just enjoying the loggerhead musks. There were Barber's map turtles in there, and it was I think 2 or 3 visits later, I was sitting there just like enjoying like nature and taking it in. I see this little turtle come up for air. And I walk over. I'm like, "Oh, a little baby common snapper," and it scurries across the bottom. And then I scoop it up. And I look at my hand, and it was a little hatchling alligator snapper. And I realized I'm in range of the alligator snapping turtle. The only thing was, it wasn't this far up in Georgia on range maps yet.
Ooh,
What I didn't
wow.
know was at that time, the state of Georgia was currently surveying that area to see if they were there. So, kind of at the same time, me and Georgia DNR were kind of both discovering that they basically came up above the fall line, which it's not a magic line for turtles. So that was
Interesting.
pretty neat. And I'd had pet ones and stuff, and I remember the one that I found just looked so different and was so fascinating. Then it just turned everything into overdrive. Now the internet was around, and I had already been obsessing over them, till 3 or 4 in the morning on the internet, just reading scholarly papers on them, looking at photos on Flickr, following the guys that have been doing surveys for the last 10 years at that point. So
Wow.
I never was able to get enough.
Oh, that is so cool. So that one that you found, was that the first one that you found in the wild?
That was the first one I found in the wild, and the funny thing was I took the
Wow.
worst picture of it, like, the worst picture. Like, Instagram was at that point still iPhone only, and I had, like, an Android, so I used, like, some, like, Walmart brand of Instagram that they had for Android, and I put this horrible filter on it, and that was the photo that I took. I look, and it's like that photo's so terrible. You can't tell anything about the turtle. Like it was so bad, and I was so bummed that that was the first one. But then, and that was in the fall. So the following spring, I went out and I knew that it was time for females to nest, and I knew that turtles were coming back out. So it was about this time of year, March or early April, and I'm waiting, and then on a sunny day, and then I just look down at my feet. There's like a hand-sized one, probably like 7-inch shell, just sitting in shallow water luring. I pick him up, and this time I got like legit photos of him, and then let him go. And then I walk upstream, and I'm looking at this bank, and then I just see this like big yellow head sticking out of a bank. I pull that out, and it was like an adult female, and likely she had probably nested, a day or two before. She wasn't gravid, but good sized female. And the ones in this area have gigantic heads, and so it was just everything that you would want your first wild adult to be.
Wow. That's awesome. Well, we've got several people joining us tonight, so I want to do some shout outs. Matthew Hills, Space Soldier 16, Krista, and Kyle are here. So thanks for
Nice.
joining us. If you
What's up,
guys have
buddy?
specific questions about alligator snapping turtles that you'd like to know, really about their biology and ecology and conservation, let us know. We'd love to ask Greg. So Greg, let's talk a little bit more about this alligator snapping turtle that you thought looked different.
hmm
When did you become aware that there might be different subspecies of alligator snapping turtles?
Well, I think by this, um, I'd already been like, looking at photos on Flickr. So I
Yeah.
had been following the work of like Jonathan Mays, Pearson Hill, Kevin Inge, Travis Thomas. And they would, say which river that they were catching them out of with these photos. And I was able to just visually notice that the ones from the Apalachicola Drainage had big round heads that were like much shorter, these really long kind of tapering jaws with like a dip,
Yeah.
kind of in the top.
Yeah.
And the ones that I had had as pets when I was younger, they were the westerns because that's what was being farmed. Whether it's in Richards or the guys in Arkansas, they're all farming ones that they rescued out of Louisiana and stuff like that. So when I saw this little hatchling, even in a hatchling, you can see that the head is stockier. I mean, the head's so short and
Hmm.
stocky that it looked like a common snapping turtle. It didn't have that really long tapered snout. So and the skin was different.
Yeah.
I remember, I think in one post I made about them, I said that their skin when they're little looks like barbecue sauce,
Huh.
fish color.
Yeah. The We'll put some of your photos that you sent me on the Facebook page so people can look at them, and
Yeah.
maybe you could go in and kind of add some comments and annotate them. But the these alligator snapping turtles, a lot of them that you have are this very almost light brown color. They're quite attractive, right? They're so much that lighter color, you can see their features better, and they really are quite striking animals, I think. So
Yeah, it's interesting. It seems as you go, like they tend to get lighter and lighter till you end up in the
hmm,
Swanee drainage where, they hatch out a lighter color and adults are a yellow color. But, even the Apalachicola drainage, which is where I've, been waiting around and finding them just by hand, those adults all, by the time they become fully mature adults, they already start yellowing. And I don't know if it's related back
hmm,
to diet or what the
hmm,
advantage to that is.
yeah,
Um, but they clearly, they look different and they have different
yeah.
coloration and stuff. And it's really pleasant to look at.
Oh, yeah. They're absolutely just stunning, and we'll put those pictures so everybody can see. Unfortunately, this YouTube feature, I can't share the photos, but so we've got the Western species. Would it be? Is that the nominate subspecies, the one that lives in the West? And what is the name of that one that's in the pet trade that we see?
Yeah, so that would be the typical Macrocheles tamekii,
Yep.
alligator snapping turtle. After the species split from Kevin Inge and Travis Thomas's paper in 2014, it divided them up into three species. So it's Macrocheles taminkii, the western alligator snapping turtle, and then there was Macrocheles
Okay.
apalachicola, and that was the Apalachicola drainage alligator snapping turtle. And then there's Macrocheles swaniensis, which is the Swanee alligator snapping turtle. Um, and then there was another paper came out a year and a half after that, basically disputing the validity of Apalachicola. And this guy said that he couldn't really see the physical differences they were describing. He quoted another paper, which actually had some errors in it about geography. And then, so because of this paper, they then lumped Apalachicola as a sister species to Taminkii.
Oh, okay.
Now, with recent genetic work that's not published yet, we may see that re-elevated. The neat thing with these turtles, though, is when they're in a river drainage, they don't get up and move across land. They stay in a river drainage, and they stay in these river drainages for millions of years. So, it's totally feasible that every single river drainage, every major one, could have genetically distinct turtles that are, you know, um, basically could be a species, could be a subspecies. I don't really like
Yeah.
wade too far into that. There's
Yeah.
definitely people
Yeah.
that know
Yeah.
way more
Yeah.
about that than me, but
Yeah.
there have been identified like basically three major, trends.
Okay. So that's really cool, and I think that's a good transition to go into their behavior and their habitat a little bit more. So you said that they don't move on land.
Yeah, and I've seen some photos of like nesting turtles and juveniles up on roads. And if you look in these photos, the road is usually the highest point. Like especially when you see them on road photos, most of them are out of Louisiana, where most of the place is below sea level. And so they have to raise the
Yeah.
road up. And if a female needs to nest, the way the females nest is they find the highest ground where it's less likely to flood, and that's what they're going to nest on. So you'll see them nesting on road banks, and then sometimes they'll cross over it to get to another section of water. But for the most part, they're really lousy at walking around on land for a prolonged amount of time. I don't even think they hold their water very well if they get dried out. So they just don't move very well over land, and some females can move a fair amount to nest, but for the most part they know where to nest and they go back to it, and they'll use the same high sandy bank that they hatched out on.
And it's very close to the water. Wow.
Generally, yeah, like I've got places that I've been to where literally, the bank is at its highest point above the water line. It's maybe shoulder or head high on me, and it's just a big pile of sand, and that's what they
Yeah.
nest on. And it's basically in some places it's like a cliff. They'll just go straight up vertical, nest on that, and then probably
Wow.
fall back into the creek or the river. We've seen some nests that are up a huge bank and then a little bit, into some trees and stuff, and we've seen some pretty neat nests. But I mean, I've seen nests where they're just right there on the edge of the water.
That's really cool. Let's talk about the rivers and streams they live in. Growing up, when I was looking at those field guides, I just pictured that these were big river turtles that lived in the bottom of very deep rivers, and you were likely to ever see one ever. And then I found your YouTube channel, and you're finding them in places that I just didn't expect. Could you describe those rivers that you search for these animals
Yeah,
in?
if you have, like, let's say you have like a major river that that they're in and the population's good, any tributary that feeds that has all of the same elements of food and everything like that, they're going to go into that. They have, like, in places they haven't been trapped or before trapping, they just completely colonize. And certain size, a lot of times, 12 inches, they have an almost 100% survival rate. And, so they'll just keep laying and producing more. And so they'll just keep working their way up these tributaries. As long as the habitat's good and the food's there, they'll just keep going to the point where you have a tributary that maybe is 18 inches deep, but it's flowing, it's got clear water, tons of crayfish and, freshwater mussels and anything that's available for them to eat. And, it's an even better deal for them because it's, a smaller area, so like a male can easily control a territory, and that's not an entire river wide. He can keep an eye on his females. The females also they can move up and they have access to their nesting places. They can move back down to deeper water. So it's funny. The smaller stuff almost seems to work out better for him.
Yeah, that's really, really fascinating. I just found it amazing to see where they live in your videos. I think it's pretty incredible. Really, really small streams. I just was not expecting it.
Yeah,
So,
and people can live with that stream in their backyard their entire life and never know that they're even there because for the most part to see the adults, you've got to go out
mm,
after midnight,
mm.
I always tell, like I always tell people like if you really want to see them, don't go out at 7 or 8 at night. Go to Waffle House, have a waffle, have a coffee, talk with your buddies. Go out at 1 to about 4 a.m. and then that's when they come out and they are really active until about 6 a.m.
Wow. So they're nocturnal as adults.
Yeah, yeah, and in some places, Carl and Viv have documented this extremely well. That over in Texas, for example, they can be strongly diurnal and even
Oh,
do
wait.
things like bask on alligators and stuff.
Huh.
So, yeah, that's worth looking up. All the Texas turtles documentation of alligator snapping turtles is amazing. It'll blow your mind.
And then let's talk about the diet. I think anybody that loves turtles, we just
Mhm.
expect them to open their mouth and eat whatever might be attracted to that little tongue like structure in their mouth. But you've shown them eating all kinds of interesting things that I never would have thought, including like black walnuts, maybe, and nuts.
Oh yeah, yeah. They'll. It's kind of different in each river drainage. So over in the west, are kind of just going to eat anything they can get a hold of. Now, when they're small, that lure, it looks like a little mosquito larva. So, and what do they lure for? They lure for
Mm.
gambusia, the American mosquito fish. And so, for me, the easiest way to find hatchlings and juveniles is to find a patch of sun. And there's just, you can see like the swarm of mosquito at a distance. Usually here, there's going to be a little alligator snapping turtle near that somewhere because they know where to lure.
Oh wow.
As they get older, the diet starts to broaden. They start to work in like crayfish and hellgrammites and little invertebrates off the bottom. They still will use the lure, and then as they get to be adults and the jaws widen out and the skull starts to kind of change shape, they develop more of a crushing surface. In the westerns, they're still going to be consuming a lot of fish, but as you work your way east, they adapted to eating like mussels. So you'll get these big freshwater, basically they look like a big clam, and they
Hmm.
like to eat those all the way up to the washboard mussels, and they'll just crush those
Hmm.
up like a Dorito. And but they'll also eat loggerhead musk turtles. One of the best ways to find alligator snapping turtles, if there's a ton of loggerhead musks, there's probably alligator snapping turtles somewhere nearby because they love to eat those. Um, but and the turtles that are eating that hard stuff will, just like a map turtle or like a diamondback terrapin, like a musk turtle, they'll get like enlarged heads, and you'll see huge plates on the inside of the jaws for crushing surfaces.
I totally forgot about that. You've shown videos, I think, of turtles that you suspected may have been uh, bitten by an alligator snapping turtle. So that just blows my mind. Turtles eating turtles.
Well, and they'll eat like a lot of seeds. Like, I've talked with other researchers, and they've had them poop out all kinds of
Yeah.
seeds and nuts and little fruits. They love
Oh,
tupelo fruit.
yeah.
I mean, they just will. You almost don't even have to bait the trap; just put it away. And they're just because they love seasonal
Oh,
fruits and stuff. I mean, they're really fascinating in that they learn, I think, over time and have the instinct to know when to eat certain things, and they're really in tune with their environment. And they'll just they go veggie heavy in the fall, which makes sense because you don't want to go into winter with a bunch of carrion in your gut.
yeah. Oh, that is just fascinating. Um, so a couple questions. Who's your turtles and tortoises? That's Matthew Hills. He says, which subspecies were the AST down in Arkansas with the huge heads?
they were just really cool looking. They were really yellow. They were massive, up to 142 pounds. Most of the males were not. Um, Most of the males were not under 100 pounds. We were scrambling to try and find one that was 90 pounds to put back into a pond with females. So they were really neat. They had huge heads, and it was funny because they didn't have huge heads that I could tell from a hard shell diet. They had like really narrow scissor shaped jaws, but they just had these giant heads, and it's almost like me and Jack Thompson, who I love him to death. We
Yeah,
talk about this stuff all the time. We were coming up with different theories on why we might think these males develop huge heads. So
yeah.
uh, we'll
Well, they
we'll
were
wait
all
and
living
see like
together,
where that
right?
comes from. Yeah, yeah, they were, and that was the thing is they were all in this pond for like 40 years, and they had to build multiple satellite ponds to break the group up. So these males, I mean, they were just on top of each other.
Huh. Yeah, you wonder if it was just like this super dominance
Hmm.
situation, right? They just all were,
They're just roided out.
yeah, yeah, like so much testosterone going on in those pods. Oh, that was crazy. So, um, uh, okay, so we got another question. Wesley Coleman said, "Is there a smallest subspecies, species, or locale, or do they all get about the same size?"
I mean, it's speculative, but from what I've seen, the Apalachicola species seems to average the smallest. I mean, most of them. I mean, it's pretty rare for them to break 100 pounds. Swaniensis, especially you get into lower Swanee, they get pretty big, 100 pounds. Teminki, especially when you get towards Texas, get gigantic. There's huge Teminki in the Mississippi, in the state of Mississippi, and then there's huge Teminki in Texas because everything's bigger in Texas.
That's
So,
right.
but yeah, if I had to speculate the smallest, I would say probably the Apalachicola, like, and maybe just because they don't need to be big because they really occupy a lot of like smaller tributaries. Again, that's just me spitballing, but I mean, even a
Yeah,
small alligator snapping turtle that's 90 pounds is still a huge turtle. So you're kind of splitting hairs.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Exactly. So we got a few more people. Mark De Silva's joined us. Violet Peterson, turtle keeping with Drew and Lou. So welcome, 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 welcome. So Greg, let's talk about conservation. What are the threats to the alligator snapping turtle in the wild?
Um, from my experience, what I've seen and what I've discussed with others, the biggest threats are going to be your habitat destruction, whether that's the impoundments of rivers, pollution of rivers, destruction of nesting area by people building all the way up to the edge of a river, people flattening out those important nest areas because they need those high sandy banks. And then the other things that is going to affect them is they really love to occupy log jams. And when people want to
Mm,
clear out a river to bring boats and stuff up of it, they look at log jams as trash, and they don't
yeah,
realize how important a log jam is to, I mean, hundreds of species. I mean, you talk about darters and fish and all kinds of stuff, but the alligator snapping turtles really need those log jams, and you clear those out, and they lose their habitat. And then obviously there's going to be the bush hooks, like trot lines, unattended
mm,
trot lines. They can get stuck in the throat. They can wrap around the throat. They can get stuck in the intestines. And then there's incidental take, people catching them fishing, bringing them home and eating them. Some people say that's not that big of a deal, but the problem is you got to realize how many people are doing that. And if you've got this family that's always done that, and down the street there's another family that's always done that, and then they raise their kids to do that. You've got people
it's
taking
the
turtles out of
culture.
the wild that, yeah, and these turtles take 20 to 30 years to mature, and maybe not necessarily even reproduce the first few years. Females are going to be small, not want to mate with huge males. The males are going to be small and get out competed by the bigger males. So it takes a long time for them to turn around and reproduce new animals. So losing any of them is devastating, especially you lose like a big old female, because the bigger and older the females are, the more fertile they are. So that's an issue, and then obviously poaching is an issue. So they have a lot of things kind of going against them, and that's, I think, where things like federal listing and that stuff is seeking to protect them, from those issues.
Are they a legal game species that people can harvest in any state that you
No,
know of?
and the
Okay.
state, I think the only state that doesn't protect them is Louisiana, and Louisiana does allow people to take. I forget what it is. I forget if it's like one a day or if
Yeah.
it's one a
Yeah.
year. But the problem is it's not enforced, and the people that live there could care if it's enforced or legal or not legal. They've, like I said, they've been doing it for so many generations. They believe it's part of their culture, and so that's a big hurdle. And the fact that Louisiana does allow take, people use it as a laundering state for poached turtles. So, they
Mm.
ship them out of Louisiana, say they were caught there, but realistically they were caught in Florida or Alabama or something like that. So, um, Louisiana has been kind of a problem for alligator snapping turtle conservation for a while.
Are there any states that are more progressive than others in their conservation and protection?
Um, Yeah, I mean, I would say that, Georgia and Alabama and, Georgia and Alabama were, I mean, none of the states reacted fast enough. They let the Campbell soup business and the turtle food industry, like, I mean, in some places nearly wipe them out. I mean, Georgia, I mean, one guy in Georgia almost wiped them out of the lower Flint River. So,
Wow.
everybody was a little slow to react, but once they did, they basically made it where they're, state level protected, can't have them, can't possess them, can't, there's no legal take. And so that would have been like Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, I think took a while to jump on board. And then Florida, I think after 2014 made it illegal to possess them. So I would say one of the more progressive states would be like Oklahoma because they have the Tishomingo place, and Tishomingo actually reproduces them and puts them back in the wild. Texas protects them and has um, pretty good laws on protecting them in Texas. Again, the problem being that they're right next door to Louisiana. And I'm not trying to bag on people from Louisiana
Yeah,
either.
no,
I
it's
love
yeah.
my friends in Louisiana, but the
Yeah.
the laws there are kind of whack.
Well, I mean that's what's interesting, right? And um, I'm a former state employee, and so ultimately the states are the first line of protection for any of these species, right? So, when you have inconsistent rules and regulations, that can be problematic for sure. So,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
but so Greg, you do education and you teach people about these turtles. Um, Obviously, we see your work through your YouTube channel, but tell us a little bit about what you're doing with your turtles and educating people about alligator snapping turtles away
Yeah, I
from
mean,
you.
so away from YouTube, I mean, I'm anytime I get a chance to do like some in-person education, I always will kind of do what I can to do it, especially with the alligator snapping turtles. In my own state, because they are here and they are native, I want people to not only know that they exist, but I want them to appreciate them because they're uniquely American. They're unique to the Southeast. They're a large, long-lived turtle. I mean, they get huge and they live long, like a Galapagos tortoise or an Aldabra tortoise, and they're really super unique. And they're intelligent animals. They're not mindless biting machines. And so my goal is just to get people to really appreciate them and want to get involved in some way about helping educate or helping with conservation, even if it's even if maybe they want to donate to an organization, or they want to um, teach about them in a school or something like that. So I do trapping surveys, and once a year we meet with a college, Valdosta State, and they bring out herpetology students, and I make sure that all the students um, get some hands-on time with the turtles. Obviously, that's in the safest way possible, but I feel like the best way to make an impact is for people to physically, touch the animals, and it becomes tangible and it becomes something that's seated in the back of their brain for life. That they met this amazing animal they're probably never going to see again unless they, choose to get involved with them. But um, my goal is just to try and make the impact that they had on me when I was a kid.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, we're coming to an end of our time. Thank you so much for joining me. Is there anything else that we didn't cover or you would like people to know about alligator snapping turtles?
I mean, I think we pretty much covered it. I just want people to know that they're amazing animals, and that if they want to get involved, I mean, reach out to or reach out to different organizations. There's TSA does surveys with them, the North American Freshwater Turtle Research Group. That's a long name. They also participate in the surveys. So does the Santa Fe. And all of those, they have alligator snapping turtles as part of their surveys, and they are always looking for volunteers. Look them up.
Awesome. Well, Greg, thank you so much. Greg's channel, Greg's Turtle Haven, is absolutely fantastic. Be sure to watch his alligator snapping turtles, but he's got an amazing archive of videos, including a trip to Thailand, which was pretty amazing. Thank you for doing that one and sharing that one. So, Greg, I really appreciate your time. And thanks everyone for joining us. If you like this, give it a thumbs up, and we'll see you next Wednesday at 8. Thanks, Greg.
All right.
Have a good one.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Bye bye.
Peace.